2,400 years ago, in the middle of a desert where summer days could roast you alive, people were making ice. Not finding it, not hauling it down from some far-off mountain, making it, on the spot, in a place with no electricity, no machines, no power of any kind. They would walk out in the morning, in a land of sand and blinding sun, and collect slabs of fresh ice they had grown overnight. For a long time this sounded almost impossible, like a tall tale, but it's completely true. And the story of how they did it is really the story of one of the oldest fights our species has ever had. The fight against heat. Because long before anyone flipped a switch and felt cold air pour out of a wall, humans all over the world were quietly, cleverly beating the heat with nothing but mud, water, wind, and a deep understanding of how the world actually works. We tend to think air conditioning is a modern miracle, and in a way it is. The machine in your window or on your wall was invented just over 100 years ago, in 1902, by an engineer named Willis Carrier. Before that, we imagine, people simply suffered. They sweated through the summers, fanned themselves, and waited for the heat to break. End of story. But that picture is almost completely wrong, because heat has always been one of the great enemies of human life. It spoils food, it breeds disease, it can kill you outright. And every civilization that ever settled in a hot place had to answer the same brutal question. How do we survive this? How do we make a cool, livable space in a world that's trying to cook us? And the answers they came up with, thousands of years before electricity, are genuinely brilliant. Let's start with that ice in the desert, because it's the most jaw-dropping of all. In ancient Persia, in what's now Iran, people built enormous structures called yakhchals. Picture a giant dome of mud brick, sometimes as tall as a building, sitting over a deep pit dug into the ground. The walls were thick, really thick, made with a special waterproof mortar mixed from clay, sand, ash, lime, and even goat hair. Now here's the clever part, and it has several layers. During cold desert nights, they would let water sit in shallow channels, shaded from the day's leftover warmth. And on a clear night in the desert, something wonderful happens. Heat radiates straight up off the water into the cold, open sky, and the water can actually freeze even when the air isn't quite freezing. They were dumping heat into outer space. They'd collect that ice, pack it deep inside the yakhchal, insulated by those massive walls and the cool earth, and it would keep. Through spring, into the blazing summer. Ice, in the desert, stored for months, with no machine anywhere in sight. But the Persians didn't stop at storing cold. They learned to move it. All across these hot, dry lands, you'll find tall, beautiful towers rising off the rooftops, called badgeers, or windcatchers. They look like decorative chimneys, but they're actually one of the most elegant cooling machines ever built. A windcatcher reaches up into the air and grabs any breeze passing overhead, then funnels it down into the rooms below. And when there's no breeze at all, the system still works, just in reverse. The sun heats the tower, the warm air inside rises and escapes out the top, and that pulls cooler air up from shaded courtyards and basements down below, drawing a gentle current through the whole house. Often they'd run that incoming air over water from underground channels first, so it arrived not just moving, but cool and fresh. These towers could drop the temperature inside a home by around 10 degrees. A natural air conditioner, powered by nothing but the sun and the wind it was fighting. And here's what's beautiful. On the other side of the world, in completely different cultures, people who had never heard of Persia were solving the same problem with the same deep instincts. Go back to ancient Egypt, more than 4,000 years ago. Egyptians were among the first people we know of to use a trick you actually use every single day without realizing it. Evaporation. They would hang wet reeds or damp cloth across their windows and doorways. As the hot desert breeze blew through the soaked fibers, the water evaporated, and evaporation steals heat from the air. So the breeze that reached you on the other side was noticeably cooler. They built thick walls to block the sun, kept windows small, wore loose linen, and turned their doorways into simple, silent cooling devices. It's the exact same reason stepping out of a swimming pool gives you a chill. They just figured it out and put it to work 40 centuries ago. Now jump to Mughal India, to palaces that still take your breath away. Here the rulers turned cooling into pure art. They carved screens of marble and sandstone into delicate lattices full of tiny holes called jali. These weren't just gorgeous. When hot air is squeezed through all those little openings, it speeds up and cools down as it spreads into the room, while the stone filters out the harsh glare of the sun. They built deep stepwells, sinking flights of stairs far down into the cool earth toward the water. They ran fountains and water channels right through their living spaces, even piping water underneath marble floors so the stone stayed cool to the touch. Thick walls soaked up the day's heat and released it slowly at night. Step inside one of these palaces in the dead of summer, and the air would feel impossibly fresh, every degree of it earned by design, not by power. And it goes on. The wealthy of ancient Rome had snow carried down from the mountains to chill their drinks and shaded their homes around cool inner courtyards. In the deserts of the American Southwest, the ancestral Pueblo peoples built their homes into cliffs and used thick walls of adobe, so heavy with stored coolness that the brutal daytime heat barely seeped through until night had already arrived. Different continents, different centuries, people who never met, never shared a single word. And yet, again and again, the same handful of ideas. Because here's the thing that ties this whole story together. The secret hiding underneath every single one of these inventions. They were all working with nature, not against it. Look closely and you find the same 4 tricks repeating everywhere. Evaporation, water stealing heat as it dries. Thermal mass, thick walls and deep earth swallowing heat and releasing it slowly. Airflow, using the rising of warm air to pull cool air along behind it. And radiation, letting heat escape up into the cold night sky. That's it. That's the entire ancient toolkit. No civilization brute forced its way to comfort. They studied how heat naturally wants to move and then gently nudged it where they wanted it to go. They cooperated with the physics instead of fighting it. Which brings us, finally, to the modern echo, and to a twist that's a little uncomfortable. Because our miracle machine, the electric air conditioner, does almost the opposite. It doesn't cooperate with heat, it overpowers it. It uses a lot of energy to grab the heat inside your room and shove it out into the street, which feels wonderful for you. But that heat doesn't vanish. It piles up outside, warming the city around you. The power it burns warms the whole planet a little more. And a hotter world means everyone runs their air conditioners harder, which dumps out even more heat, which makes it hotter still. We solved our own discomfort with raw force, and in so doing, we quietly made the original problem bigger. The ancients bent the heat. We just bulldoze it and let it pile up somewhere we're not looking. And here's the genuinely hopeful part. The reason this is more than a charming history lesson. Architects and engineers today, facing rising temperatures and rising energy bills, are going back. Back to the windcatcher, back to the jali screen, back to thick walls, shaded courtyards, evaporation, and cooling by the night sky. They're designing modern buildings that stay comfortable using a fraction of the power by remembering what a Persian builder or an Egyptian craftsman understood in their bones thousands of years ago. The future of staying cool might look a lot like the distant past. So there's something worth sitting with here, something bigger than ice or airflow. For almost all of human history, we couldn't overpower nature. We weren't strong enough. So we had to be clever. We had to watch and listen and understand, and then work along the grain of the world instead of smashing through it. And the moment we finally got powerful enough to brute force our problems, we mostly stopped being clever. We forgot that the smartest solution is rarely the strongest one, that sometimes the deepest intelligence isn't about force at all. It's about understanding something so well that you barely have to push. The people who made ice in the desert never beat the heat by being stronger than it. They beat it by understanding it better than anyone. And maybe, as our own world gets warmer, that's the oldest lesson worth remembering. If you love discovering that the so-called primitive past was quietly smarter than we ever gave it credit for, then you're going to feel right at home here, so think about subscribing. And here's my question for you today. What's one everyday problem you think we now solve with brute force that our ancestors might have solved with cleverness instead? Tell me your best example down in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.